Sammy, you have borne the brunt of your supporters, your members, during the vetting processes. I believe that they will belong to the 50-something plus that say, forget it, whatever is there, it won't bring us any benefit. What do you say?
Something. First of all, those of us in Parliament must admit that this finding imposes on us higher obligation, that the Ghanaian people would not take business as usual any longer, that they expect this uncharted waters we are in, this hung parliament, to deliver the democratic dividend. If you look at other expectations they have, they are saying that they expect these numbers to even ensure better attendance in parliament. They expect the numbers to improve parliamentary democracy. They expect the numbers to keep the executive in check, to aid security of international contracts. So we must be paying attention to all these expectations, and we must deliver on them. Even as they express this high optimism, they are not oblivious of possible challenges. There are some significant numbers who are saying, about 61%, who are saying that this could slow down decision making. So we must make sure that when it comes to matters that are in the national interest, we do not use the numbers to unnecessarily, disrupt. We should not stampede. We should act in the national interest. 60% says that if care is not taken, MPs may connive on issues that affect them. So
personal interest,
elite interest against the interests of the masses. And then 57% say that it could disrupt the MPP's government's business and agenda. So you can see that the Ghanaian voter is increasingly getting more sophisticated, more nuanced, and very, very, very intelligent. So we must ensure that in Parliament, we do not let the people down. And these numbers must count for something. The hung Parliament must count for something. And I hope that we will all, as 275 members of Parliament, and the Speaker, there is such high expectation for the Speaker as well. 77% are saying that it's a good development and that they expect him to assist us to make sure that this democracy works and delivers the hopes and aspirations of the people.
Right. It must be said, however, that some of the people, when you listen generally, have actually singled out some of the MPs, particularly opposition MPs, and thankfully you are included, that they trust that so far from what they have seen, you are doing what they expect of you. For example, you have been very consistent on one of the issues we are coming to discuss now about how that is bleeding the public purse. It is wasteful. It is not prudent thing to do for us to have a presidential jet, and yet the president will not use it. And excuses you say are lame, are giving, and so much is spent on luxury jets, so you say. Yes,
it's humbling to note.
I realized first that you wanted to give some reactions.
Yes, because Dr. Sai raised the question about the sample and suggesting that maybe we should have looked at a sample that takes into account regions that the president won. First of all, that would not be proper because this is a post-election survey. Elections are over. A government has been installed. The government is operating for all Ghanaians. And the questions we are asking are about government policy, the commitments that the government that has been installed has made during the election that it's going to implement. So it is not only for those who voted for the president. This is going to be something that impacts everybody. So the sample has to be a national representative sample. But the second point is that regions don't vote. There are human beings that vote in the region. And even if you take, some of the regions that the president won, Bono or Northeast and so on and so forth, it's 51-40 whatever. So even if you're taking the voting population and distributing it statistically, it will still be, in the Northeast, there will be a smaller amount of voters that you use, because you're talking about the universe of voters. You will get more in Ashanti, you get more in Greater Accra than you get in Northeast. So I think that we have to, move away from that, because the suggestion is that if you have people who voted for the president, maybe they will have a better appreciation of that. But this is a sample that you can clearly see Ashanti and all the places that the president won are still very strong. The numbers are more there because in the larger population, that is what is reflected. And yet you are still getting these results. So actually, it should be a real indicator for government to take it seriously. That if you have a sample that even has a lot of citizens who voted for you in the election and they are still saying these things, then you should take it seriously.
Okay.
So I don't think that in terms of the methodology, there's any problem with it, with what we have used for this survey.
All right. Now, maybe a final question to you, very substantive. I find that the people have certain concerns. They have certain concerns, very germane concerns, you may say. So, for example, you had where they said they speak about unemployment issues, then they come to talk about the issue of the Ghanaians are split in their confidence in government's ability to consolidate the gains made in the planting, rearing for food, yes, and jobs program in the next 4 years, but a majority, 61, express lack of confidence in the government's ability to expand the $1 million per constituency initiative. We spoke about the corruption issues, where you had 53% saying that they didn't have confidence in the ability of the government to protect the public purse, curb corruption, and official impunity, 62%.
Yes.
When you compare that to Afrobarometer 2019, where you had come to the conclusion that corruption was being normalized, what should be done to address this? Solutions, what should be done?
So I think for me, in the short term, there's two, almost like we are pursuing a parallel reality. So government's response when these matters have been raised, and we've had a lot of engagement. Even just recently, civil society went to see the president. Is to say we have invested in institutions. We've set up these structures. We have passed this legislation. That is true. The other reality is that corruption, we are not curbing corruption. And in many ways, it has become normalized. Now, we have to find a way where we meet, where we accept that in spite of the investment that we are making, we are not making gains. So, what is the problem? Is it that Mr. Bobia Samoa talks about time, right? I look at the data from 2017 or even 2014, and I realize that we have a problem. We seem to have stagnated. So I don't think it's a question of time. The indices of progress has to be seen. It has to be palpable. It has to be felt. So there has to be an acceptance that whatever investment we are making, it is not making the gains. But what is the problem? Is it that the money is not going to the right places, or the strategy is wrong? If we can come to that acceptance, then we can move forward. At the moment, we are on this side. Those of us in civil society on one side, government is on this side, and we keep talking about the problem instead of dealing with it. So I think that for me, that is one thing that has to be, in terms of the narrative and government's own approach, that it has to happen. The second thing I think is a signaling from the president. That it seems that, in many cases that you have mentioned, what the expectation of the public is, we don't get it. And that signaling has huge effect on the public service and political appointees generally. When you have taken a certain action against somebody else down the line knows that if it's happened to Mr. A, then it can happen to me, and therefore I have to discipline myself. If those two things can happen, I think we can begin to turn the corner. But I really think that the interrogation we have to have.
So the thrust of this is, and I noted a certain preamble to one other question, and a minute if you can give me some response. There are issues with poor economic management, manifested in huge borrowing for shoddy, inflated projects, leaving a crippling debt against what the Constitution commands in Article 36. The Constitution commands sound and healthy economy, quote unquote. So over the period, the politicians are failing us. To avoid waste of scarce resources, the Constitution commands the commonsensical duty to continue predecessor projects. Our fourth Republican history is replete with the criminal waste in the abandonment of projects to rot as successor regimes start new ones for the obvious procurement corruption that you keep talking about, procurement corruption, leaving us in a cycle of impoverishment. I note lastly that the Constitution commands, quote, take steps to eradicate corrupt practices and abuse of power, unquote. You see in the report, people have issues with impunity, abuse of power. Yeah. But the Afrobarometer 2019 confirms the dreaded normalization of corruption and official impunity, rape of the public purse, and the lack of good governance. Question is, if this democracy, our system, doesn't seem to deliver the expected benefits, at least fix the country. And now there's a very latest one, national interest movement, which are seeking a new or overhauled constitution. Should that be the focused option? Because that's what they feel. The system is not just delivering the benefit. You just said so. Is a new constitution the way to go?
I think there's going to be a lot of debate as to what a new constitution, what I have come to experience in the last 16 years I've been doing this work, is that laws are not enough. So you can have a whole process to change the constitution, but the individual that is going to enforce those rules has to come with a set of values. And somebody needs to be able to monitor that person. If the person doesn't have those values, hold them accountable, so that there is an expectation within the system that, yes, you have to go with integrity. But even if you don't have integrity, the system will hold you to check. We don't have that. And the biggest example is the Auditor General's report, which annually we get. And you ask yourself, the public financial management law is one of the most stringent laws that we have. You don't hear anybody even get suspended for breaching rules, cash irregularities, stores management, whatever. So that it sends a signal that somebody else can't do it. When Dom Levo was doing the surcharging, you could see the difference. Yeah. So for me, those are the steps that it is still within government's remit and power.
But if Dom Levo, as you insist, it does not have the sufficient constitutional protection, is it not a constitutional architecture that checks that if you have a president you have said, Kwesi Prempeh, Professor Raymond Atogba, you say that we are operating an imperial presidency. The president does almost everything. Appoints in excess of 6,000 board members and CEOs and all of that.
So
if you have a new approach where you clip his wings over all of these matters, won't it work?
As we wait for that, because for me, corruption is an existential threat. All the agitations that you're talking about, I don't know how long we have before it gets serious. So for me, there are things that can be done. I remember we wrote to the finance minister, because the finance minister has surcharge powers even under the Public Financial Management Act. And I expect that when these reports come, there should be clear directives, whether it is on cash regularities, on stores or whatever, and sanctions applied so that the system knows that, you know, there are certain behaviors that's not allowed. What I know is that the Finance Ministry does not have a unit that is there to enforce the Financial Management Act. And I think that it should have a unit. So there are things, as I said, that is within the executive's remit, that if the president is signaling and some of these institutional actions are taking, it will sanitize the system. Whilst we have a big debate about,
and you are hoping that this doesn't get worse. I heard that one.
Yes,
guys, I'm taking just a minute's comment from each one of you. Then we take a break. I'm taking just a minute. Then we take a break. Now, Sammy, what do you say in the face of the frustrations of at least these two groupings asking for a constitution? Is that the way to go?
I support the demand for a new constitution. I have my copy here. I go everywhere with it. The report of the Constitution Review Commission, 960 pages. They did such a phenomenal job. Excellent job. I haven't heard anybody criticize.
It's totally 1,000.
The work they did. You know, there is a Constitution Implementation Committee report available. All we have to do is move to the next step. I think that we all have to support the demand for a new constitution, because having served in the executive, having served in the legislature, it's clear to me that you really have constitutional bottlenecks that allows for persons who have low integrity deficit to exploit. And I agree also with Dr. Asante that we need to take a second look at who we are electing, who we are giving our public resources to. All those who are agitating out there, I will encourage a lot of them to also take interest in coming into the space. Don't stay outside and allow others with low integrity threshold to come. They will exploit the constitution. But finally, I am glad that the majority of respondents that CDD spoke to, 67% of them say they will vote against the political party of erring political officials.
Okay, thank you.
So let us all beware.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Odrosai, 1 minute. What do you say? Those calling for a new constitution out of all these frustrations and lack of actions, is that one option to look at?
Definitely, Samson, it's one option, because when you look at the CRC report, I mean, a report that recommends an amendment of more than 50% of the current constitution technically requires that we have to draft a new constitution. So the challenge is, where do we go from here? Because this current constitution is really not a development constitution. It's a stability constitution that was supposed to help us transit from a previously military regime to stabilize constitutionally. But if we want to develop, we need a new constitution.
I didn't expect that from you. As a student of the Constitution yourself, okay, that's interesting. Bwamia, 1 minute. What do you say?
I don't believe the entire Constitution should be jettisoned and rewritten. I think we must go step by step. I think there are 4 critical areas we must deal with. One is the local governance situation, where I say that the development, the democracy loop is incomplete at local level. So we must elect DCEs and MCs on partisan basis. Article 55, 243 must go. I think we must deal with Article 71. Every 4 years, it tears this country apart, literally. And we must do something about it. I think we must do something about 72, which ties the executive's hands into Parliament in this hybrid system, which is supposed to oversee and check itself. It's a bit tough on the players that you play in two rooms. In one room, you are expected to deliver. In the other room, you are expected to oversee your self-delivery. The hybrid may be a bit problematic. Okay. I think we need to look at how we'll get the best out of that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I like the way you went specific aspect you want to be done with. We'll take a break here. When we return, we'll start with Dr. Dosai straight to check what is going wrong with the MMDCEs and if the president has been breaking any law in this regard.